Hi, Facebook friends. Helen Archontou here, CEO of the YWCA of Northern New Jersey. Welcome to our Thursday night Share the Mic Now Power Chat. As you know, the YW has been hosting Share the Mic Now for a few years. We've spoken to so many wonderful Black women on our Thursdays sharing their stories. It's been my great honor to meet so many amazing women and amplifying their businesses, their experiences. And recently we decided to add two favorites and regulars in my life and my chat chains, my power chats, to have kind of a heartier conversation and bring more viewpoints and questions once a month. And we're so grateful to have with us today my co-hosts, which I'm so grateful that they can join us, Miss Rhona Vega, who's the founder and CEO of Matterz. And those of you know her great organization because it provides educational tools and resources for families and children in marginalized communities and empowers them to succeed. And also so grateful to have this time with Sheilisa McNeal-Burgess, who is the founder and CEO of FRIA, a company that creates beautifully designed bracelets that decrease the intensity of hot flashes that women experience during menopause. But today, the three of us have the wonderful honor of chatting with Jackie Taylor, who is a business strategist, a motivational speaker, and author. Jackie Taylor is also AKA Business Boost Doctor, she is known as, and she's going to share some tools with us and some advice on how to help under-resourced business owners grow and scale their operations. Let me share a little bit more about Jackie before we jump into the conversation. She has been inspiring audiences, sharing her business insights and motivation due to her unique blend of passion and strong professional acumen in the business world. She is an award-winning businesswoman whose podcast, The Real Juggle, takes an unvarnished look at what it really means to be successful. And through her achievements as an executive for a Big Four consulting company, she's a sought-after member, a sought-after mentor, and she's a successful author. Through all of those great achievements, she offers real-world advice and inspiration to entrepreneurs. She helps people from diverse backgrounds realize their potential and engage more rewardingly in lives and in their careers. She's recognized for her high energy, vast intellect, down-to-earth humor, and unerring ability to connect with people through their hearts and their minds. And she brings her strength, a fresh focus, and a renewed sense of purpose to individuals and organizations for a global scale. She's a mother of 5, as well as an executive and a caretaker and a trailblazer for women of color. Her insights and personal experiences provide tools for everyone as we try to juggle the demands of our lives. And Lord knows we're all juggling, that's for sure. She is a proud Brooklyn native and she lives in Georgia, although she happens to be in New Jersey today. So we're, And then she serves on numerous boards as well, volunteers regularly in the community, a founder of a nonprofit organization, The Real Respite. And the mission of that organization is to provide reprieve and relief to individuals who care and support for the most vulnerable members of society. So grateful that you could join us, Jackie. Welcome.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here. It's a party with the 4 of us.
It sure is. So let's start the party with just, you telling us obviously you have such vast experience. What compelled you to share it with others and, take all you've learned and, help others just be better at what they're doing, thanks to all the lessons you've learned?
Yeah, good question. So I spent over 20 years, that's all I'm going to claim today, over 20 plus years providing management consulting to Fortune 500 CEOs or C-suite executives, to governors, to mayors. And I help them figure out how to operationalize their vision and their strategy. And I realized that a lot of those tools and those methodologies were completely applicable to small businesses. But the only difference is, when you start using certain vernacular or you use a lot of acronyms, it just makes it inaccessible and difficult to understand and something that's unattainable. So I decided to write the book, Give Me a Boost, to just, create a brass tacks, handbook for the entrepreneur who's really good at what they do, but just needs some help on how to like create the infrastructure and operationalize their business.
Well, we love that you created that book, and I know Sheilisa was waving it a few minutes earlier. And for those of you watching, we're going to make sure that you've got the link to the book in the comments so that you can check it out. At the YW, we have a We 360 program that's specifically focused on helping support entrepreneurs start their businesses and keep them strong, with a specific focus to women of color. So we love this opportunity to get to hear from you, and that the women in our program get to learn from you today too. So Sheilisa, let's pass it to you.
Well, first of all, I have to tell y'all that Jackie has been my idol for a lot of years. Okay. She does so many dynamic things. So she glossed over her business acumen about how she does it and where she does it. She's a partner at EY. You don't get to be at that level unless you have strategic capabilities that are on like a superior scale. But I didn't even know that about her. I didn't know where she worked when I met her through another friend of ours. She was doing so much with kids, and just like, she really wanted them, young kids, to have better access to quality, I would say, tutoring, above and beyond, like what they was offered in schools. So she decided to create that program, right? Then she created like another children's book, and she created a whole methodology for teaching them. Like, she called it, they had a KABER, right? And it was an acronym for things, and her little boy could recite it. And then on top of that, she was like, I'm just loving children. So now she's got several, and doing all of this while also running a business. And she's always been super supportive of entrepreneurs. So since I've known her, that's what she like. If she knows that you're doing something and it really is above and beyond what's the normal expectation, or from yourself, she's going to be a champion for that. So I love her in that capacity. But my question, Miss Jackie, since I know you personally and professionally, and you've always been a champion of entrepreneurs, a mom, a leader, you have all of these, I would call them titles after your name. But what always awed me about you is how you manage to keep it all together. And we know that when you are a mom, and when you are a business leader, and when you have, community passions that you just pour yourself into, it sort of takes out all of it drains you a lot, right? So I want you to tell our viewers and the women who are going to be looking up to you how you manage it, right? Where does that grit come from? And how do you make the time for it all and still make time for you? Because that's really something that we don't do often when we're pouring into others. And I don't want you to sugarcoat it. I want you to give us like the real deal and tell me what challenges you the most in all of the titles that you carry. What challenges you the most? But tell us how you make it work, because maybe you can give us some tips. So those of us who might be going through it be like, I don't know how I'm going to do all these things, or I can't do all these things. How do you do it?
So first, I love that you said that how you keep it all together, because it is not always all together. Do not believe Instagram. I do not post everything. Facebook, don't believe anything that you see on the outside. That's why I call it a juggle, because there are definitely times, always, where something else I've got going really, really well. Like my kids are all happy. You're the best mom ever. Like that's going well. And then I've got like fire drills happening at work, or, things are breaking in the house, and I've got 3, people who said they were going to come by and fix it, and they didn't show up, And so there are always stressors that are going on. And so I would not even subscribe. That would be my first thing. Don't even endeavor to have it all together. It's not going to be all together. You're going to have to enjoy and sit in when you have individual elements of your life that are doing well, and be okay with failing in those other areas. And that took me a while, because I personalized when things were down in other areas. I personalize it. The other piece of it is I am truly, and I have not always been this way, because I am truly guided by what brings me joy. And so I spend time doing the things that bring me joy, because I've learned in my 40 plus that that fills my bucket and it gives me the energy to deal with all the other ish. And so I mentioned that because initially I felt selfish as a mother, as a caretaker for my, aging mother. I felt that when I did the things that brought me joy, if there were things that needed to be done, I was almost like guilty. And I was guilty. I was guilty that I was happy and enjoying myself while, there were little fires going on. But I realized, because so many people depend on me, I have to do that. That's the gas tank. You're not going to drive a car without gas. That's the gas tank. And so I've been super deliberate. Sheilisa, you know this. I take vacations. I take solo vacations. And so what I do, in fact, I just came back from one, because the family vacation, you're tired when you get back. If you do it right, you're tired when you get back, because they have to eat 6 times a day. You know what I mean? Like, they want breakfast, they want snack, I don't know about you guys, but I remember like my stomach growling until lunchtime. But these kids eat like 6 times before lunch. And so, and then you're planning activity after activity. So by the time you get back, you're exhausted. But what I do is I plan solo vacations. And when I went on my first solo vacation, it was to Mexico. And I literally realized a day and a half in, I said, it's been 24 hours and I have not spoken, like not a word. Like, I might have done, the gratuitous nod to somebody walking by, but to go that amount of time without the TV being turned on, without talking, I can eat if I wanted to eat or drink a juice or something. Like, I realized how much that fills my bucket, how much being around water fills my bucket. And so I would say, definitely don't pressure yourself to feel like you have to juggle everything. Make time for you. It doesn't have to be like an excursion somewhere. It could be in your backyard or locking the door to your bedroom. But make time for yourself, and then you can give and try. It takes time. Try to shed the guilt.
Awesome. Okay, Rhona, go ahead. What you gonna say?
Yeah, you did ask me the hardest role.
The hardest role, yeah, the challenge.
Role. Yeah, the most challenging role is the mom role. I would say the mom and the daughter caretaker role. And that's because if something falls down at work, I can like separate myself from it. If something falls down with like business or the book, I can separate myself, but I can't sleep when something goes on with like the kids or with my mom. And so that's probably the hardest, because I'm so emotionally connected.
So how do you deal with it? So you can't take a vacation if there's some fire in the house, or mom needs something. Mm-hmm. And because you are so adept at managing every aspect of your life, not perfectly, right? Because we all perfectly imperfect. But is there any one go-to thing that in those super challenging moments that you do that you think, I should share this with others, because, maybe they'll figure out how to help themselves when they might be faced with a similar situation?
Prayer. So my youngest kids are teenagers, and I jokingly say I have prayed more in the last 10 years than I have if you add up my entire life. Like, when I was forced to go to church to when I went on my own, I've prayed more in the last 10 years. And so I know some people who are watching your show may be atheist or agnostic. Call it meditation, call it what you want to call it. But we have to see and recognize that there is a power higher than us. Where you start to get depressed and in a rut is when you feel like the solutions all rest on your lap and you can't figure it out, because then you're at a dead end. And once you're at a dead end, it's going to be hard to get out of that. But when you realize there's a higher power, that it's only going to last but so long, and then you'll be able to get through it, it does something for you. So I would say prayer.
Amen to that. Go ahead.
I was about to say the same thing. Amen to that. I have prayed more. Yes. So listen, first of all, thank you for giving those nuggets that you've already shared. As a mom of 5, I definitely feel that journey. Yeah. And I discovered a lot later than you in life, but I'm so glad I did. I've been on this self-care journey of the medications. So I'm so glad you're talking about that, because it was so hard for me to, once I got through security at JFK, I was like, you know what, there's no turning back. But to get there, the week of packing. And so, I think, one of the things I heard you saying is like giving yourself grace, and even with the guilt, go for it. You
Go
need
for
that
it.
time. We have there's a friend of mine that's leaving for Greece and tomorrow with her family, and I said to her, find a spa and get away while you're on vacation, like just for the day or for a few hours. And it's
Find
challenging as women, so I'm so glad.
Yeah, people make fun of me, but I have this connection to trees. I'll just find a really old, raggedy Asian tree and just like cop a squat or climb it if it's short enough because I'm not into, but like just that connection to nature. Find a spot
Yes,
or find a spot.
yes,
So you're right. And
yes.
little tip, global entry. Global entry. Now the only thing is that you kind of debate leaving your family when you have it and the whole family doesn't have it, but global entry is your friend.
Oh well, right. So I got a question. So as a mom of five and a highly successful businesswoman, wow, I just, all your accolades are just incredible. I wanted to talk about your podcast, and so I listened. The most recent episode I listened to was the one with you and Dougie Fresh. Oh my goodness, that was amazing. That, and I've literally sent it to like 15 people. The Real Juggle, my goodness, that is just so brilliant and unique. I just want to say that, so you can talk a little bit about more about that. But so your focus on your, how do you focus on this work-life balance? And I understand your podcast, I understand what you're talking about. How can women learn to manage all these roles, right? And this is coming from the heart here, literally. And what kind of support is needed to make this happen, for them? Because there are a lot of different things. I was in your situation where I was caring for my kids and my mom, and that's challenging. I have a lot of friends in that same role right now, and it's a lot. It's a lot to do. My mom has passed on, and I'm so glad I did the work that I did with her and did pour it in, because I it just made me feel a lot better to make sure I was there. But it was challenging, to say the least.
Yeah, and I wouldn't give that up for anything in the world. The time I spend with my kids, the time I spend with my mother, who's my bestie, my road dog. So I'm 100% there. But I created the Real Juggle because I was actually, Sheilisa and Rhona, I was in a slump. So I was in a slump. I started to, you know, I was mired in all the different things, and I started to feel overwhelmed. And I'm one of those people, I learned that I tell people I get high, and they say, wait, and I tell people do not leave until I explain what I mean when I say I get high. So there is actually, there are studies that show that there's a such thing as a helper's high, that when you help other people, it actually releases chemicals that make you feel that same, right? That high feeling, that lift from helping other people. And I realized that I'm built that way. And so instead of kind of like rocking in the corner, I'm being facetious, but like rocking in the corner and, saying, woe is me, I just threw myself into, first being vulnerable, because I realized that I could not receive help, because when you're a helper, you don't always know how to ask for help. And people ask me, it's like saying, hi, how you doing? And people say fine, or they don't even answer. It's just rote. So when people say, do you need anything? I'm like, no, it's just automatic. And so what the Real Juggle did was it allowed me to tell my story in the guise of helping people, because that made it easy for me to do it. But it was also cathartic for me to just get it out and to feel like it's okay, and to not be embarrassed, quite frankly. When you have kids with special needs, or you're dealing with mental health issues, or you're overwhelmed. And I'm a consultant. I fix things for a living. So when there's an issue in life and I can't fix it or Google it or figure something out, it is very overwhelming. And so, to your point, the Real Juggle was very cathartic for me. It allowed me to kind of release and also learn from myself as I listen to the podcast, going forward.
Well, I also want to echo that I really appreciate you talking. I mean, we do talk a lot about mothers and the juggle of mothers and business. But the caretaking piece is really very common, but we don't talk about it as much. And, as Rhona and Sheilisa know, I'm that sandwich generation poster child with my 92-year-old mother that I care for and my 10-year-old twins, on the daily. So I live it myself. And it is different. I couldn't agree more what you said earlier about how you can, figure out the stuff at work, but the stuff at home hits different, and hits different for sure. So I want to ask you though, I mean, obviously you wrote this book to share, it was cathartic as you just shared, and to share what is, when we and you're a consultant, as you said, and you go in to fix things. What do you see as being the thing you end up fixing most for people? What's
Yeah.
the top of the list?
I think the number one thing on the list for entrepreneurs. So you talked about how the YWCA, you help businesses go from like the concept stage to like everything from like their business plan to the LLC. So there's that entry level entrepreneur. And then once they've got their sea legs and they're going, they've got some revenue being generated. They may even have some regular contractors and full-time employees. Between that stage in the maturity model through like their flourishing, I felt like there was a gap. And the biggest thing that I'm seeing is that they're so accustomed to being the only one and having to do everything themselves and working in their business, they can't figure out how to extricate themselves from the business. And you can't grow if you are the business. If you're the only one that can talk about and do certain things, if all the clients only want you in the room, there's no way you're going to be able to scale. And so the biggest challenge that I see is helping these entrepreneurs figure out, one, how to internally grow and scale their business. How do you get the right infrastructure and operations and let go? And sometimes even realize that maybe you're not the face of the business. Maybe you need to hire somebody else to be the face of the business. So there are some hard decisions. And in my book, I talk about the 3Ds, right? Put a taxonomy, put a list together and say, here's what I absolutely have to do because I'm the visionary. Here's what I can delegate. And then here's what I can dedicate to an outsourced provider to get that done. And so going through things like that is that exercise, helping them extricate. And then the other piece of pulling themselves so they can work on their business and not in their business is looking externally. So how are you going to grow and scale your revenue? That's the only way you're going to grow, right? New cash, lower your expenses. So we talked about internal expenses going down, but I talk about the 4 C's, right? So how do you look at commercial clients, your individual consumers, government contracts, and then collaborations? People miss that 4th one. Collaborations and channel and alliance relationships to help you grow. So I kind of go through those in a very, like I said, practical, brass tacks, non-academic way so that the average business owner who's at that stage for growth can kind of consume it.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. That we really see that as being one of the regular issues that our small business owners talk about, and you framed it so nicely as a real kind of roadmap to get out of the issue. So thank you.
Yeah, that all hit super home for me. I think I always considered myself actually like an infant in this business. It's a passion of mine, but I'm definitely there where I'm like, okay, God, okay, universe, send me someone, and you just said it so eloquently that, you really can't grow. You can't scale if you're in the mix and all that good stuff. So I have another question. Speaking of businesses and being an entrepreneur, can you talk about the risk and rewards most entrepreneurs don't fully consider when they decide to expand their business? We were talking a little bit about this now, but
yeah. So I'll start with the risks because I want to end on the positive with the rewards. I think from a risk standpoint, when you take that dive to actually stop getting a paycheck every other week or the 15th and the 30th, there's obviously risk to making sure that your base, needs are covered for yourself, for your family. So we kind of all accept it and are cognizant of that. I think the other risk that people are not as cognizant of, I talk about in my book when I talk about energy boosts, is that entrepreneurs have a higher likelihood of suffering from depression, isolation, mental health issues, and overwhelm as a result of the grit and the commitment that it takes to be an entrepreneur. And so I try to make sure that, this wasn't just a very didactic book on, how to grow your enterprise, but that we looked at like the whole entrepreneur and we talk about that, because that's a huge risk. And that's a risk to you being able to kind of go to the next level. I think from a reward standpoint, especially for historically under-resourced entrepreneurs, you think about not only being able to provide for your family, but 20% of the country is, Black. Less than 2.5% of business owners are Black, right? And I was just talking to someone the other day in Pittsburgh. That's just an average nationally, because in Pittsburgh, it's 20%. and less than 1% are Black business owners. And the similar proportions when you look at women business owners, when you look at Native American, Latino business owners, and even veteran entrepreneurs are very few and far between. And so when you see that that disparity and you look at the wealth gap in these historically under-resourced entrepreneurs, the reward of entrepreneurship is great, because not only can you support yourself, but you create jobs for your community, right? 7.5 million employees are a result of small business owners, create jobs for your community, and then you build generational wealth. So everybody, I think we all as parents, we want to set things up so that our children don't have to work as hard as we do, and it's cumulative and you build. When you are an entrepreneur and you create a business that you've grown and you've scaled, then you've made it easier to create that generational wealth so that, you know, your children and your children's children don't have to start out with the same deficits that you did.
And that's awesome. So Jackie, you know, you keep using the term under-resourced, and, you know, I've had conversations often with you about access to capital, right? And I know that you're a super champion of that, but can you share what you mean by under-resourced? Because I think it's you're not limiting it to just the concept of capital or money, because under-resourced could mean a lot of things. Can you go a bit into that?
Absolutely. And we can talk about the money because everybody wants to talk about the access to capital. I'm happy to do that. But in addition to people automatically equate under-resourced entrepreneurs with under-monetized entrepreneurs. It's a thing. There's definitely a gap there. But under-resourced also refers to relationship resources, which is why in my 4 C's, I talk about collaborations and partnerships. It also talks about exposure. So if you didn't have a rich uncle to kind of guide you along the way, or, sit in the businesses while, when you were a kid, while your mother or your grandparents ran the business where you had a generational business, if you don't have the benefit of learning from the hard knocks from generations before you, you're already starting at a loss and at a deficit, right? From others. And we just don't have the mentorship, right? And relationships, because that just doesn't exist in these under-resourced communities. Not only do we not have the money, but we also don't have the content, right? Just the knowledge. We could be really good at owning a salon, really good at technology, really good at these different things, but not really good at running a business and its operations. Just the other day, I had a conversation with the New York Giants has a NFL podcast network. And I was talking to athletes about being under-resourced. And the host, Charles Way, used to play for the Giants, and he did player relations. He said, "What do you mean athletes are under-resourced? They make millions of dollars. How could they be under-resourced when they leave? Because all they know is football. They likely have been playing football and doing that since they were teenagers or kids. And then they became professional athletes. And then they have a great idea. And then they've got money to actually make it happen. But they are still under-resourced as it relates to content, know-how, and relationships." So I was giving him some ideas on how they can build those relationships. The last thing I'll mention is the math works. The math is mathing if you look at kind of following that trajectory. And 3/4 of businesses that have mentorship, meaning you have an idol, someone who's accomplished to guide you, 75% of those businesses are successful. So why don't we have mentors for our minority entrepreneurs and women-owned businesses so that they can be successful?
That is a great question. I went to an event today that is from a well-known organization. Not going to mention names because I'm not trying to disparage anyone, but I was the only person of color attending. That was a part of the attendee group. There were people who were working, but in terms of being there to participate and to gain the knowledge that was being shared, and it was for entrepreneurs, and it was all about capital, and I was the only one there. The beautiful thing is that I understand now through mentorship that you provided, or I've gotten through EY, or I've gotten through other incubators with, Melissa Bradley and 1863. So I've had the benefit of having those relationships built over time that taught me how to operate in this ecosystem. But when you're the only one in the room, it really makes the under-resourced concept a lot more glaring. So give me a tip, give me a boost tip, Jackie, on how to manage in those environments.
Yeah, I always say do your homework ahead of time. And it was similar to the advice that I gave to these, top-notch celebrity athletes, right? When they go to these galas and they have speaking engagements, it's the same advice. You should look at where you want to be with your business within a 1, 3, 5 year time frame, and then you look at what you need and where your gaps are. And you are very knowledgeable, just like others, to say, who is doing it well. If I had my druthers and there were no limitations, who's doing it well? From CEOs to COOs to just other entrepreneurs who have just, been able to kind of progress, and be deliberate when you are in those rooms. So before you're actually meeting that person and making small talk, be deliberate about networking. And as well as I do, that networking is bi-directional. So in your mind, you should have an idea of what value that person can provide to you. But then you should also think about, this is what people skip. You should also think about what value you could potentially, because we all can provide value in some way, shape, or form to that person, and start there. Start with understanding what their needs are, where they are, and how you can add value. And then the universe, I always say that between the universe and the good Lord, things will come together, and those relationships will start to make sense.
Awesome.
Yeah, can I ask a question too? You talked about, and I think it's true, and I'm asking because I want us as the YW and other, folks watching to actively help with this. How do we make more mentors that are women of color? How do we create that environment and that support? Because, we know, I mean, I know this, right? I know that it is hard for women-owned businesses, but it's harder for businesses of color, even more so. So how can we, we always talk about, you put a hand, you bring your chair to the table, but you always, for someone who looks like me, need to bring an extra chair for a woman who's not white, to come to the table with you. How do we help make more mentors?
Yeah, so that's a really good question. And one of the things I say is, even though Give Me a Boost is focused on under-resourced entrepreneurs, if I removed that subtitle, the nuggets and the information in here would be applicable to anyone trying to grow. It could be a white male trying to grow and scale their business. They would still be able to benefit from those nuggets. And so I share that to say that the way we make more people of color who are able to be mentors is that we take that screen off when we're identifying mentors. So if you can get a group of small business or entrepreneur, I like to call them emerging businesses and those founders in a room, and connect them with mentors from whom they can get value, regardless of what their racial or gender, connection is, then they are ultimately going to be that next generation of entrepreneurs. So I would start there. The information is the same, right? The value is the same. The progress is the same. But the only way you can add value is if I'm not at the same level, but I've been able to kind of grow. I've been able to scale. I've been able to build my network outside of myself, right? Then I can reach back and do the same thing for someone who looks like me.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
And the YW will continue to be working to create that space for sure, but that's helpful.
Absolutely.
Next question. Rhona, you got something? Because I could do this all day. I can talk to her all day.
Oh, I didn't want to take up all the time here, but wow, you said so much, and so much is applicable to me and my business, and the work that I do. Yeah. So how can someone get mentored by you? How can someone reach out to, really, because I'm sure there are probably women, looking, and Helen asked a really good question. We don't, a lot of things, I was in business for 3 years before I had certain information, and every day I'm still learning, like, so much. And it's like, oof, if I had known, I think there is some value to going through some things. So I don't even call those years really business years. I call that a focus group. But it's a journey, and where do you start? And having, thank goodness the YW is out there for us, and but not everybody knows this, and not everybody has access, and it's really important. And I have such a solid support system at home and throughout my own network, and my and family and friends. Other than grace, like, what else can you tell, folks who are just like at that verge? I've had at least 3 times within my business where I was like, that's it, I'm done.
Right.
And then the universe and God will send me a message or a text, and it's like, what? Well, what do you mean? And then I keep going.
Yeah. So what's interesting is I think we all have those moments, right, where you question, you start to introspect, and I think the biggest thing is being deliberate around it. So I said that a couple of times. In my book, I talk about creating a mastermind circle. So often when we look at mentorship, we look at a person. I need a mentor, and it's not necessarily about getting a mentor, because quite frankly, the value that I could add to someone, and I have my mentees that I work with in different industries, the value that I add to someone could absolutely be complemented by someone else who focuses on a different area, who's more like, who double clicks and doubles down on an area where I don't have deep set expertise. And so I always encourage entrepreneurs to create your mastermind circle. You got your person you talk to about relationships because they're just like masterful, right? They're in the room, they take all the air, like people know they're there. Like that's that person. Then you have someone who's like type A, finances, numbers, spreadsheet systems. Then you have someone else who's like myself, who's more strategic, who's looking broader vision and helping you figure out how to plug in the different pieces. And so it's important to create that mastermind circle. The other piece, again, I talk about this in Energy Boost, is part of your mastermind circle is not only supporting your business operations, but who's going to support you on those days, Rhona, where you're like, I can't do this anymore. I'm just going to go get a job. I've had some mentees tell me, somebody sent me an offer for a job, and I think I'm for a while. After being this young lady is an entrepreneur since she graduated college. She never worked a job, but it can be so stressful and so overwhelming. So part of your mastermind circle needs to be those people that you can commiserate with, that you can vent to, but who also understand your vision and can kind of help you through. Do you guys have mastermind circles or people that kind of fill those roles?
Well, I definitely do. And to your point, it's definitely a plethora of people. It's not one go-to person, because each person brings something different to the table. And that easily segues into the whole concept of knowing strengths and weaknesses, right? Because one mentor may have strength in finance, but they're weak in operations, or they can have strength in strategy, but they're weak in problem solving in other areas. So how do you really go about assessing your own strengths and weaknesses when you often are the person, the go-to person in your business? Most of us, and I don't like to limit things to women of color or people of color. I think entrepreneurship in general is a hard thing to do. And so that means that everybody probably has a hard time. But when you are the central person or the key person, I think the lines get blurred when you're talking about what your strengths and weaknesses are, because you just think you have to be strong in everything. You talk about in your book performing an assessment of that. What's that assessment look like?
Yeah, and thank you for mentioning that, because in the book I talk about the SWOT analysis, right? Your strengths, your weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. And you look internally and you look externally for your business or your organization.
Right.
But I think what you're alluding to is the element where you look at your profile. So
Yes.
we understand the profile of a successful entrepreneur. What are those characteristics? And so I think that's where those me-cations and solo-cations come in, or that, like you said, Rhona, finding a spot, because you need quiet time to just be honest with yourself, right? Be honest with yourself about what your strengths are, what your weaknesses are. And if you spend enough time with yourself, because I've spent time with my mentees, and you just let folks talk, they will end up saying exactly what their weakness is, even though they didn't want to say it in the beginning. So I gave the example of like needing someone else to be the face of your business. I didn't have to tell that person they needed someone else. After we talked and well, I'm really shy and I don't like to do this. And I don't like this. And after a while, it's like, okay, so what's the profile of the person that needs to be in front of the client and do those interviews and be able to think on their feet? Okay. But you just said, you see what I'm saying? So sometimes if you just pause from the day-to-day and the fires, and you start to say, today I'm going to tackle who should be my face. Tomorrow I'm going to tackle, I got my credit together. Somebody can say, I've got my credit together so I can, get this SBA loan. But what contributed to the bad credit to start with were some poor habits. And so maybe I need to bring in someone to create some discipline around how I'm managing the finances of the business. But you need time. You can't do that happenstance, right? You need time to be able to pause and figure those things out. So that's what I would suggest, just taking that time to introspect. And if you're not good at it because you're the type of person that can justify anything, and that's what makes you good at your business, you better ask somebody. Ask somebody. Ask somebody who loves you. That's the criteria, because if they don't love you, they'll lie to you. But if they love you, they'll tell you the truth, and they'll tell you where you need to, augment your team.
And so you're absolutely right, because we often hush our own little voice that says, that's not you. I learned over time that, my extroverted, introverted personality says, Sheilisa does not like to network. She does not like to do that. But there are definitely other areas, creating and innovating. So that's one we talked about money a second ago, and I just want to go back to it quickly. Since capital is one of the biggest barriers in terms of access to scaling and growth for a business, any business. What are some creative ways to gain capital? I've had to be, I always tell people I know how to make $1 out of 15 cents, because I've had to stretch what I have, right? Because I'm like, no, I'm not flush. Nobody just came and gave me $50 million and said, do what you want with it, right? So when capital is your barrier, I know sometimes we focus on what we don't have instead of focusing on what we do have. But do you have any tips that would help somebody figure out, like, if you can't just put your hand on $10,000, $20,000, $50,000, what are some ways to circumvent that so that you continue to make progress?
Yeah, there are a number of programs out there for women-owned businesses, veteranpreneurs, veteran-owned businesses, Black, Latinx, and Native American businesses that are targeted to historically under-resourced emerging business owners. So the first thing I would say is get your finances in order. Very often, because I'll tell you about a few other programs, but at the end of the day, it's all going to come back to your personal finances. In the beginning, when you're starting a business, your personal credit is the credit facility for your business. You're going to be co-signing. You're going to be, guaranteeing different things, whether it's a copy machine or a large scale loan. So that's the first thing that I would encourage. Now, there are also tons of programs. So in Atlanta, for example, there is an incubator, a business accelerator program that, you can have space, the co-work space, but they have a strategic partnership with a local organization that will provide $10,000 with no credit check as long as you're a member of that particular organization. And so that's the Russell Center in Atlanta, Georgia. That's an example of researching and affiliations lending itself to you being able to access capital. Now, for those of you viewers and listeners who are looking at capital beyond that, there are economic development authorities in every state. And so reach out to your local economic development authority, because they generally have programs, whether they're incentives for building out your location, even sometimes if it's in your home, right, for doing build outs, or low interest loans or things like that. So that's another avenue. The other avenue that many business owners say, I didn't think I was ready yet, are chambers of commerce. So in different jurisdictions, especially in New Jersey, we've got the New Jersey Chamber, we've got the African American Chamber of Commerce, we've got the Latino Chamber, Hispanic Chamber of Commerce. There are a ton of organizations that are chambers whose job it is to make sure that you are in the know when there's capital, incentives, or even short-term programs that you can take advantage of. So you want to be able to do that. And then the last thing I'll talk about are grants and contests. So there are pitch competitions, a number of pitch competitions that you as a business owner can compete in. As long as you have a strong value proposition, you've got a good strategy, and you're able to articulate that, there are organizations that will help you, right, with your message and with your pitch. And I've known people to win millions of dollars in seconds, right, 60 seconds, relative to a pitch competition.
Well, both of these two ladies know a little about that, because they both won the pitch competition, at different levels for the YWCA National that they both competed in, and others, of course, too. And it's so important that we continue to create those opportunities, those creative opportunities. Sheilisa, I'm so glad that you mentioned the capital question, because I know Jackie said earlier, well, you can ask me that question. And I really thought we would be remiss, if we did not. I also want to make sure that our viewers know that the YW was funded thanks to Senators Booker and Senator Menendez. $500,000 to be able to create micro grants to give to women in the workforce to help them with business costs, childcare, which we know is one of the areas that creates a challenge for women in business, and training. So we do look forward to sharing how you can access that later this year. And I do also encourage all of you out there watching to think about ways that you can create these kind of creative opportunities for our women and our, specifically anyone who's, from an under-resourced community, to be able to access funds for their businesses, because, that's right up there. I always feel like the two questions we get so often are, when do I expand and bring more people into my business, and how do I do that? And where do I get the money? They really are such core issues for success.
Yeah. And what I would add to that is I kind of gave some of the examples of like, lump sum, cash amounts to kind of help you inject cash. But again, when I talk about those 4 C's, increasing your client base is also going to help you do that. And so if you join organizations like WeBank and the National Minority Supplier Diversity Council, there are corporations who are members of these organizations who they wake up every day in their supplier diversity teams figuring out how to add businesses like yourselves to their coffers, right? To their database, so that they can provide these opportunities. And corporate contracts are great. The other thing that I mentioned is federal certification. So 8A certification. There are tens of millions of dollars in set aside money from these federal agencies that they've said, we have to give this to a minority owned or small business enterprise, that go unused. And so I spend a lot of time teaching people how to boost their business with government contracts. And, the people who I'm a hairdresser, I'm a makeup artist, I have artwork, I can't get a government contract. Well, who do you think was adorning those buildings? Who do you think, I sell wallpaper, how can I do it? So I always challenge the entrepreneurs that I work with to expand their aperture a bit and think about those 4 different potential revenue streams, because those are tens of millions of dollars, and that's really great revenue coming into the organization.
I have a question. You mentioned the National Society. What was that name? What was the name of that entire organization?
NMSDC, so the National Minority Supplier Diversity Council.
Gotcha.
They're a national organization. They have a conference each year as well. And then they have regional organizations where you can get your certification. So for example, the Eastern Minority Supplier Diversity Council has reciprocity, that once you get certified through EMS in DC, say that 5 times fast, you are automatically a vendor for the state of New Jersey, of Delaware, and of Pennsylvania. So now you can tap into local government contracts to do business with the city. So if you have services and training and you want to work with the local school system, being part of that supplier diversity database is going to help you accelerate that.
Well, that's a tremendous resource, and we'll try to find it and stick it into the chat for everyone. I also want to make sure that our viewers are noting that in the chat, we do have the link to JackiePTaylor.com. And so you can be more connected to Jackie, learn about her books, learn about her work, and how you can be following her. And I would also encourage you to follow her on her social media platform so you can stay connected to her and the work that she's doing. And we also do, and we'll be dropping the links in here for you for exposure and opportunities at Path for Learning and for myfria.com, because, all of these entrepreneurs and thought leaders and mentors, that have joined me this evening have so much to share with you. And I do hope that you think about, I know I have so many nuggets floating around my head. Always the mecation is such a important one, because, it, and we always say, right, you can't pour from an empty cup, right? But, it is really one of the hardest ones to embrace. So that was very meaningful for me to hear. I'd love to hear from Rhona and Sheilisa. What are some of the nuggets that really stuck with you from this conversation as we're wrapping up for our viewers?
Way too many nuggets to
I was going to say,
mention.
Jackie's chock full of nuggets. But more importantly, it's understanding that there is someone to emulate, right? So if you see it done, the things that you aspire to by someone who looks like you, then
Yes.
it takes away the concept of impossible, right? And
Mm.
so that is what actually drives me all the time in this journey that I tell people all the time is harder than childbirth and raising teenagers, both of which I've done. But if somebody had told me, girl, you're gonna be broke for years, while you're trying to build this business, I would have been like, I'm not doing that. I'm just gonna continue to, get these contracts and write these scripts and call it a day. That's what I would have done. But thank you, Jackie, for being that type of role model without having to say I'm a role model, right? Just being able to be in the room where you get to glean from the knowledge that you've already gotten that you share freely is beneficial. And having a place that you can go that's a one-stop shop to at least get the nugget of information so that you can go and research it more. That is also very helpful. So that's what I got out of it. But I've been getting more out of it over years, so I'm fortunate.
Yes. Yeah, definitely. I mean, this has been such an inspirational messages that you shared. Somewhere in your bio, I heard the term respite. And so just, because I know just folks listening too, and you talked about the medication, it's very easy to say, very difficult to do, but it's so important. And once you do it one time, whether it's 24 hours or 30 days like I did, and when I'm talking about that because a lot of us find ourselves in these sandwich generations, and know that there is respite care when you're caring for an elderly person. I went on a 30-day medication and from Rome to Dubai, and I had to put my mom in a nursing home, and it was respite care. It was a beautiful place, but her insurance allowed me to take that time from me and go away. And it was so important. And I was so proud of myself. I cried for a long time, it took me 6 months to find a place where I was comfortable. But I'm just saying that to say and to encourage, since we're talking about the medication, you got to take care of yourself, because when you do what you got to do for you and you're filling your bucket. And my mother was so proud of me. As soon as I got back, she's like, "You're back from Africa already?" So yeah.
Don't you come back? I say I always come back. I'm a better parent. I'm a better daughter. I'm a better friend. I'm more fun. But you bring up something. If we have a couple of minutes, just for me,
please.
So for me to share why I created Real Respite. So prior to adopting, my youngest daughter adopted, I was a foster parent for a lot of years. Like in my late 20s, I decided to be a foster parent. It was something that in our family, like we always did. And when you are a foster parent and you get licensed and you have kids, you have respite. So because I'm licensed, I have provided respite to other foster parents. They have provided respite to me. And so that's where I learned the concept of what respite was, right? So you can take a break from being like a caretaker, because all kids have needs, right? And so you just need to be armored for that. So once you adopt, there's no formal respite. And when our family first went through, not first, but when we went through like the biggest crisis, when kids become teenagers and they start going through hormones, a lot of the mental health issues exacerbate, right? The medications that they had before may not work with that mix. And there was a time when, consulting Jackie, I needed to figure out how to handle it. And all I kept asking for was if I could just get a day or two to just, even if it was like going to Edison or Somerset and getting a hotel and just, I was in Jersey at the time, and just let me think. And so I called the ARCA Somerset. I called the old foster care agency, and they were like, once you're the parent, you're the parent. We don't have any programs for adoptive parents. Like, even though I have 3 special needs and I have my 2 oldest and my mother. And so fast forward, I ended up using our organization's benefit to find childcare, through Bright Horizons. And I paid, through what's the nanny site, babies, you know what I'm talking about. Yeah. So I found support, but I wanted someone licensed, right? That's why I wanted to do the respite. So I found support. It was very expensive. And I paid for myself to be able to go so I could think and figure out a plan for how to take care of my family. And when I got back, I put the plan in place, but I cried because it was not lost on me that when you hear news stories about parents that reach their wits' end or harm their children or harm themselves. And I said, if I didn't have, between my family helping and the means to do that, what would I have done? And I know that I'm not the only one who's experiencing these types of issues. So once I got the wherewithal, I created Real Respite, and I, put out, and I, invested myself, because he didn't have a track record at that point. And I covered for an all expense paid weekend for caregivers. So if they were the primary caregiver and they needed to go somewhere, they needed a break. And so I took them to the city, to a play. We stayed at Sojo Spa. They got spa treatments. I got all small businesses to kind of support it. We got food catered. And I told them, if you don't want to do the activity the next day, you can sleep in, because that's what I needed too. I needed some sleep. And so that's a long-winded way to say that Real Respite came again cathartic out of my experience. And I realized that I was blessed and I needed to pass that blessing on.
Well, that couldn't be a more powerful place to end today, is just creating that space, and also taking what you've learned and sharing it, and creating blessings for others from that experience is so powerful. Jackie, thank you so much for being with us this evening and sharing so much of yourself. Folks, she didn't share it all. The rest is in the book, and you should read it for sure, so please check it out. I know Sheilisa, well, there she go, right on cue. That's what I wanted. A good wave there, a good wave. And so thankful to my co-host Sheilisa and Rhona also for being part of this conversation. We just enjoy how organic this flows, and just creates an opportunity to just help inspire others.
Thank you for having me. Great.
Thank you. You're looking at part of my mastermind team right here. So I'm blessed.
We are so happy that we had this time, Jackie. We've been working for it for a long time. I'm so glad you got to share this opportunity, and I'm so proud of you. Like, you just always make me super proud. This book is something that you should get if you are an entrepreneur. You're looking just for tidbits, and it has like places to take notes in there. It's a hard journey, but it's doable. Thank you, Jackie.
And it's worth it.
Amen.
Yes.
And it's worth it.
Yeah.
I love it.
All right,
Thank you, Jackie. What a blessing.
Thank you.
Stay safe and be well.
Good night, everyone.